Hello. Happy Sunday, everybody. So happy you guys can all be here joining me today with my very special guest, Julian David Stone. For those of you who might be new here today, my name is Antonia Carlotta. I am the great grandniece of Carl Laemmle, the founder of Universal Studios. And my channel here that you're watching this on, Universally Me, is all about Universal and classic horror and all of that really fun history. Julian, I am so excited to be here with him today. I'm going to let him give a full introduction, but he's just such a good friend of mine. He's an incredible author of this book, It's Alive, which we are going to talk about. And he and I are going to be appearing together at San Diego Comic-Con next Sunday at 4:00 p.m. And we'll be doing a signing together at 2:30. I've got the information scrolling at the bottom right now. Julian, hi. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be on your terrific YouTube channel. It's great. It's great to be here and really excited for our Comic-Con experience coming up next weekend. It's going to be great.
Yes. Yeah. I just can't wait. Oh, and you know what? I have to take a quick sidebar really quickly. In the last week, I just passed 10,000 subscribers on my channel. Such an exciting milestone. I kind of can't believe it. And I'm so excited. It's been a really cool journey to get here. And I'm so appreciative to all of you guys. So thank you so much. And while we're talking here today, please put all of your questions in the comments. We want this to be like a conversation and have fun, and we're all hanging out together. So let's do it.
Yeah, and I just want to interject and congratulate you on the 10,000, and it's well earned. And I've noticed it's gone pretty much well beyond 10,000 already. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Julian, you know, I would love to start by talking about your book, It's Alive. I have a link to it in the description. So everybody, I really highly recommend that you buy this book. It is, well, Julian, why don't you tell us what it's about? Let's start there.
Well, it's the story of your relatives, largely. It's the story of Carl Laemmle Jr. and what he went through getting Frankenstein made. It's a great father and son story of, you know, a classic story of Junior was put in charge of the studio at the ripe old age of 21 for his 21st birthday. And like a lot of kids, they think they can do it different than their father. And obviously Junior's father, Carl Sr., was quite an accomplished man, but Junior, being filled with the gusto and pep, as they would say back then, of youth, felt he could do it differently. And fortunately for all of us, he wanted to make the classic horror films. And it's about what he went through because nobody thought it was a good idea. And he plowed ahead anyway and did it. And it's also, he had to make ultimately a major decision about who to cast in the film. And that's where Boris and Bela come into the story, because a lot of people don't realize that Bela Lugosi was originally supposed to be Frankenstein. The Junior wanted to build on the success of Dracula with him and originally cast him in Frankenstein before it ended up being Boris. And it's about what finally went, you know, sort of a fictionalized account based on as much fact as is known. But apparently the decision kind of came down to the last minute. By the historical record shows that the decision was made pretty late. Kind of an interesting fact is the fact that there is no mention of Boris Karloff in any connection to Frankenstein until the first day of shooting. Is the first time that there's an article in the newspaper anywhere stating that Boris Karloff will be in Frankenstein. There's lots of mentions of Bela leading up until several months before that he'll be in the film, but Boris, not until the first day of production is the first time there's any mention. So it's kind of the story of those last few days before the film begins shooting.
I wonder for Boris himself how long he knew that he might be in the running. Did he not know until the very last day, or maybe he had some idea?
Well, you know, that's one of the other great things. There's a lot of conjecture. And one story that I also incorporate into the film, that not only did it apparently come down very close to the beginning of the shoot that he would get it, and actually the contract that he signed to be in it wasn't signed, I believe it's dated the first day of production. So there's even more proof of how late. But he was actually shooting another film for I believe it's The Guilty Generation, and Roland Lee, who was directing that, apparently helped him and kind of shot him out of the film early. And if you ever watched the film The Guilty Generation, it's not a bad film, kind of forgettable, but just a classic sort of film of the era. Boris has kind of a major role in the film, and then about halfway through, he kind of disappears. And it almost looks like, and I kind of use this story in my book, suddenly you just have a very tight shot of Boris that looks like the kind of thing they could have shot in an hour to sort of shoot him out of the film, and so that he could, go off and do Frankenstein, because it does abruptly change. He's in all these scenes with a lot of characters, and then suddenly in the second half, he's on a telephone and in a tight shot for the rest of the movie, which they could have shot out in an hour.
It's amazing that they accommodated him, because I'm sure some directors that would have said, nope, here's the schedule. Sorry, you can't get out of it. And I think the story of the Universal monsters would be so different. Of course, the story of Boris would be so different. So it's incredible that they did that.
And kind of an interesting synchronicity, and this will be part of something that most likely we'll be doing in a couple of months when we talk about Son of Frankenstein. Roland Lee directed Son of Frankenstein. So it all comes full circle that the director who got him, shot him out of another film so he could do Frankenstein, 8 years later shoots the second sequel of Frankenstein. So it all kind of comes full circle.
Totally. And what inspired you to write this book to begin with?
Well, I started as, growing up like a lot of kids. I'm a little bit older than you, Antonia, and I go back to I'm sort of born at I'm born in the beginning of towards the tail end of the monster craze of the 60s. So there was a great phrase I heard somebody, it was actually Daniel Roebuck. Do you know who Daniel Roebuck is? The actor. He's a huge a monster fan and a very successful actor. And I saw him talk one time, and he referred to our generation as children of the glow, referring to the glow in the dark Aurora kits. Because I grew up on those in the 70s. I built those model kits with the glow in the dark pieces. So that was my first introduction to them. I would watch them, in reruns and build the model kits. And, I liked them as a kid. And then I kind of lost interest in them as I got older. Then I rediscovered them when I was an adult and working in the film business. And I was now, in my 20s and 30s, and I looked at them again, and I saw so much more, how much more complex, particularly the ones of the 30s were. And I decided I wanted to read about the history. And then when I landed on the story of Junior, that a 21-year-old was running a movie studio, that just absolutely blew me away. I couldn't get over that, and I couldn't get past that fact. And that's when I sort of clicked. I said, okay, there's got to be a story in that. And then, of course, when I found out about this thing about the decision between Boris and Bela coming down to the last minute or right before the shoot, that's where it all kind of came together.
Yeah, and I love the way, in addition to the Boris and Bela part of the story, how you talked about that father-son dynamic between Junior and Uncle Carl, and how you really brought that into the story as well, because I think that's a universal experience everybody can relate to, right? Trying to either make their parent proud or trying to show that they know what's best, that kind of push and pull in the family dynamics. So I think that's really cool. What was like, yeah.
Oh, no, go. Well, I was going to say it also, as a writer, you're always trying to find the different levels of things. And also when you really analyze Frankenstein is a father and son story on a level. It's a creator coming to terms with its creation, not quite turning out the way he intended. And that's every father kind of goes through that. So that, the layering of it is when part of what sort of got me excited to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was like the research process like for you once you kind of decided this was the path you wanted to travel?
Yeah, it was fun. I love research so much, sometimes to the detriment of I prefer it so much more to the actual writing. I just read everything I could. I love history in the moment. I much prefer that than reading somebody else's 15th generation analysis of it. So I read everything I could at the time. I read every issue of Photoplay for 1931. I love reading that because it's so fun. First of all, you learn like anything. Nothing is new. Everything today, the terms may be a little different, but it's, who's the hot act? Is it Greta Garbo? Is it Garbo? And you see their stock rise and fall within the year. So I realized that I needed to to know what was going on in the film business, because when I'm kind of derivating a little bit, when I started the research, I kind of just focused on the monsters and Universal. And then I realized, you know what, I need to understand what was going on in Hollywood. And that's when it sort of really enriched the story, because it was at a fascinating moment in Hollywood that it's also the introduction of sound is coming in. So you have this huge transition coming in, and this would have a big effect on Boris and Bela, particularly Boris, because and I guess Bela to a degree, they both had stage experience. And this really helped you as an actor in the early 30s when sound was coming in. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, Boris was kind of going along and not doing so great. And his stock had gone up a little bit around the time of before he gets cast in Frankenstein, largely because he had all that theatrical background. So that's something that came from the research, knowing what was going on in Hollywood.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. I love, my favorite type of research, it is reading those old like Photo Play or Moving Picture Weekly, right? All Universal Weekly, all of those things. And I love just going to newspapers.com and, you know, searching, of course, Boris or Bela or any of the monsters and the stories, but also just looking at everything else on the page to give you the context to, like, I don't know, what was the neighborhood like at the time and what else was going on. And one thing then that I love that like you bring into the book, and for everybody who's just joined us, we're talking about It's Alive, which is the book that Julian wrote about the days leading up to the making of Frankenstein. One of the things that I love is so much of history. And when you're reading about it, it tends to be very just fact, right? You're just sort of dryly going through this story, but this is the first time that I get to experience a lot of the characters in this book as real people and kind of live a day in the life with them. Even my Uncle Carl, like, sure, I've got letters, I've got pictures, I have read, I think, everything there is to read about him, or I'm trying to at least, but to get to, I don't know, hear his thoughts a little bit and see just like what a day was like for him. That's a totally new thing for me, and so cool to experience.
Oh, well, thank you. Your uncle is a fascinating character. There is criminally not as much written about him as he deserves, and he seems so different than the other studio heads were tough SOBs. There's no question. Uncle Carl beat some very tough people in business, Edison among them, as you know, but you just don't get any of the sense of, like, you know, you read about the other guys, you know, you get why they got where they did. Uncle Carl, and he was kind of the first, he got there, and I still cannot completely figure him out, because it doesn't, I've yet to see he just never seems anything more than sort of your sweet Uncle Carl. Yeah. Like, and yet he just slays everybody. Like he beats Edison. He gets together with a group of other people. You know, they form Universal, and then one by one they all disappear, and he's the last one standing. And it's an amazing story. Like, even before you get to Junior's story, his story is unbelievable. Just the way he just blows me away, and I still haven't entirely figured him out. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I wake up every day praying that it's not going to be the day that I find out something terrible about Uncle Carl, because through and through, everything I learn is like, he was just the best guy, the nicest guy. He really was Uncle Carl. I think, you know, he clearly was persistent. He clearly had a strong moral compass and all of these things that helped guide him. I know that people found him sometimes annoying because of his persistence, right? I'm sure that he was just like the mosquito that would not leave Thomas Edison alone. And when it came to, you know, even saving refugees, obviously a really important thing, I know a lot of people found him annoying. They thought he was overreacting or maybe hysterical. So it's not that everybody always like wanted him around necessarily, but he was always nice. He was always good. He was never out to like backstab somebody or hurt somebody. And that, I think, is one of just the most incredible and noble things. And that's not something you get from any of the other studio heads, as far as I know.
Yeah, no question.
Is there anyone else in researching for the book or in writing it where they kind of surprised you or turned out to be different than you were expecting?
Oh, that's a great question. God, there were so many fascinating characters. You know, I made sort of a major character out of Sydney Fox, and I thought she was
Mhm.
really interesting. Just sort of a classic actress that had like a 3 or 4 year run and then kind of disappears, and that's such an interesting story, and sadly so typical, but I thought she was somebody who I found really, really interesting, the way that she kind of rose and had some major roles and then just kind of disappeared. I found her fascinating. And obviously Boris and Bela, endlessly their story, the more you look under it, particularly Boris. um, I did not know a lot about his career, and I just found him so fascinating that the uh, his performance is so profound. And having watched so much of him, when you watch Frankenstein, I don't see him. Other roles he does, I say, okay, there's Boris, but that's
Mhm.
the something about that role, and that's the reason that all these years later, it's so popular. There was just something that brought out of him as a person, and it was interesting discovering that by watching so much of his other work to see how profound that performance was. And Bela endlessly fascinates me, the way he was able to become a star in 3 different countries. That's most people, nobody becomes a star practically anywhere, and he does it 3 times. He does
Mhm.
it in Hungary, then Germany after the war, and then he comes to the United States. So he's remarkable too. So finding out about him, and he had a tough run of it, particularly at the end, but there's no question, he left behind quite a legacy.
Yeah, I think, with Bela, I do always think about the tragedy of like his life and how difficult it was for him. And it always does feel in such stark contrast to Boris, who it really seems was just a happy sort of family guy,
Yeah.
in some ways on the other side. He had his home in Benedict Canyon, Coldwater Canyon, the most beautiful like Spanish colonial house I've ever seen in my life, with a big garden. He had all sorts of animals. He just loved like gardening and hosting of parties at his house with friends and family. And it's in such stark contrast to then what we know of Bela and what his life was like, particularly after Dracula.
No question. And the other unique thing, and if you want to transition a little to talking about our panel, but we're going to do the panel about the 2 of them. And one of the interesting things that they had in common was the fact that they both achieved success in their 40s, which is extremely unusual in Hollywood, that they really were not known at all, and then overnight they become these huge names, and later in life. And Boris always understood how lucky he was. He used to say that
Mhm.
about, he says, I love that Jolly Green Giant, it gave me my career. He had a real, he didn't feel, people, it could have been easy to be upset about being typecast. Although if you really look at his career, he really wasn't, particularly in the 30s and 40s. He got quite a wide range of roles, but he was so happy. Like you said, he just always seemed to be so appreciative of how it had transformed his life and given him, the second half of his life was very different than the first half. Bela seemed a little bit, I think he ultimately got a little more pigeonholed, and he seemed a little, I don't want to use the word bitter, but a little more frustrated, particularly when the roles kind of petered out for him in the 40s and the 50s.
Totally. And you know what? I'll pull back here. I have the information on a running across the bottom of the video, but for anybody new who just joined us, Julian and I are going to be appearing together next Sunday at 4 o'clock at San Diego Comic-Con, and we will be talking about the twin titans of terror. So Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, and their work, I think, together and on their own. We will also be doing an autograph, a signing in the sales pavilion, autograph area 21 at 2:30. So we hope for anybody at Comic-Con next week that we will see you there. And yeah, let's just keep building off of this, because I mean, there's so much to unpack. Of course, we don't want to spoil too much from what we're going to talk about next week, but there is so much to unpack about Boris and Bela. I think that probably the fact that if they were going to be sort of your traditional leading men, your romantic leads, I don't think they would have had a chance to get that stardom in their 40s. But it's the fact that it was these unconventional roles that then I think they had that chance. And I have to wonder, and I think it's probably true, that it helped that Boris was British, which is probably a little more, it's easier to see that as mainstream or elegant or any regular role, versus Bela's accent that probably prevented him from escaping then that Dracula legacy and those more evil characters that he got pigeonholed into. I don't know. What do you think?
No question. But in Bela's case, it's so fascinating because as much as going forward from Dracula, the accent may have been a hindrance, I'm absolutely convinced that without the accent and his presence, the film is not the success it was. He was the first to take, look at Nosferatu, that's a very different version of Dracula. He made Dracula sexy and he made him exotic, but exotic in a way that you wanted to learn more, not exotic like Nosferatu, where you want to stay clear of him. So that is sort of the catch-22, that's what made it such a success, but also kind of pigeonholed him and made it harder for him, going forward. Where, like you said, Boris obviously had the advantage of it being, being very fluent in the tongue he needed to be to continue his career.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a far left turn here, right turn. Just what is your favorite collaboration between Boris and Bela?
Oh God. You know what? It's funny that I like different ones for different reasons. I love the Black Cat, their first, and one of the things when me and Antonia do our panel, we're going to concentrate on the 8 films they did together. We're going to do an overview of the whole career, but they did 8 projects that they were both in. The Black Cat is so fun because it's the first time they're together. They're kind of equal co-leads in the movie, and the whole film is just the two of them in conflict with each other throughout the whole thing. So it's such a joy. So that I appreciate for that. In terms of I think the best movie they made is The Body Snatcher, the last one. But unfortunately, their casting is so different. Bela, unfortunately, is in his decline by then, so he's only in a handful of scenes, but he's spellbounding in it. And Boris is so good. That's one of his best films. So those are kind of opposite ends, that I enjoy of them. And I also like probably the least known or second to least known of their movies, which is God, I can't believe I'm spacing out. Oh, You'll Do It. The Kay Kaiser movie. This is terrible. Oh, I can't remember exactly the name. I think it's
Wait, is this
the one where they're with Peter Lorre? Oh, I can't believe I'm
this is also not one of their Universal collaborations.
No,
or most of your favorites are not their Universal collaborations, I'm hearing.
The Black Cat is
yes,
the favorite, of the Universal one, and The Body Snatcher is not. God, this is terrible. I think it's called You'll Do It or You'll Own It. They act with Peter Lorre, and it's a totally goofy movie. It's Kay Kaiser was a radio star in the 1940s, and like a lot of people, when they break through in one medium, they put him in movies, and this was a movie about his crazy little radio band traveling, and they end up in basically a house, and Boris and Bela and Peter Lorre sort of stalk them, and they're so entertaining. They have all these great scenes together where they're scheming. You wish there was more of them. So that's another one of my favorites. I can't believe I can't remember the title.
I'm wondering if maybe somebody in the comments can help us out here. I feel like I know their Universal collaborations really well, and some of my homework going into this coming week is to get comfortable with some of these other films that they did outside of kind of Universal.
From 1940, and I'm blanking.
Somebody says it's called You'll Find Out.
That's it. Thank you very much. It's yes. You'll Find Out. It's not a great film, but they're a blast, and you wish they had such bigger parts, because Boris and Bela, and particularly Bela, are still at the top of their game, and their scenes are so fun because they're just openly scheming to kill Kay Kaiser and his band, and it's really, really fun. It's meant to be a comedy. It's also an interesting film. It's their first turn into spoofing their images. Up until then, the Raven, the Black Cat, the Invisible Ray, those aren't spoofs. This is the first turn in their careers where they're actually having fun with their images, and it's just terrific.
I would argue, I don't think it's a particularly good movie, but if you've seen The Gift of Gab, where they have a very brief collaboration, it leans in that direction.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's only 10 seconds of Bela, but yeah, you could say it's a spoof. I'm not quite sure of their outfits in that movie. Neither one. The costume choices are kind of kooky, and that whole movie is very odd.
No, I remember seeking it out. I've only ever been able to see like a very blurry, grainy version of that film.
That,
I think in
that,
general it just wasn't great, but
Well, as I'll give away part of the presentation, but because that's their second film together, as I refer to it, it was a lost film for a very long time, and when you see it, it might have stayed lost when you actually get a chance to see it, because it's not great. And the reason it's so grating, I believe, the only surviving copy, somebody videotaped it off of television in the '60s. And
wow.
yeah, that's why it's very hard. The only version of it is that it was lost and somebody got it, recorded it off of TV, and whatever that version they showed was lost, and that's all that exists of it.
Gosh, lost films have been on my mind so much lately. I mean,
Yes.
obviously because I just did my London After Midnight video, which is still lost. But I am always just wondering what lost films might be found and where they might be found. There was that Lincoln film that Universal had made. I think it was a Coppola? No, Francis Ford film. That was from the 20s that was just found this fall, like in an archive in Long Island. There are always, versions of these films, like maybe London After Midnight exists somewhere in a way that we don't even know, where we'll get to see it. I think I've mentioned my mom once found a lost film because she ordered a film canister off of eBay. I think it said Imp or Universal or something, so she thought it was cool. And the guy was going to throw out the film that was inside because he thought it would be too expensive to ship. And thankfully, my mom just said, no, whatever it costs, send it. And it was a Mary Pickford film that there had been no like complete print of. That was called, I think, Maid or Man. Yeah. So I think about lost films all the time. I want to just like break into every abandoned building and warehouse and theater in LA just to see if one is there somewhere. But that's so cool that Gift of Gab was found because somebody had recorded it off of their television. And
Yeah,
that just gives hope in some weird way that there's more out there. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to, if we want to go a little bit more down the rabbit hole of the lost films, there's just as a sidebar, there's a belief that there may be a lot of stuff in Cuba because, they basically, to some, in terms of their economic relationship with the United States, sort of ended in 1959, 1960. And there's a belief that there may be a lot of lost films there. And one can hope maybe London After Midnight, or if we have other classic film people, Convention City is the other great one that everybody wants to see, that I really want to see too. It sounds so fun. So one can hope that those do one day reappear.
It always surprises me how I think Cuba comes up so often in film history in a way that probably because of all of our political history, like doesn't get talked about. But even Carl Laemmle took crews of took productions down to Cuba for a while during that time when he was trying to escape Edison and sort of stay safe from him. So I think Mary Pickford and Jack Pickford, Thomas Ince, they all went down to Cuba and made films down there. Yeah, there must be so much that we just don't know.
Yeah, I know. You can only imagine what must be there, and hopefully these films will show up.
I want to turn to a question that we got in the comments from Jason York. He says, how do you think the Universal monsters reflected the fears and anxieties of the eras in which they were created? And what do you think a modern Universal monster would look like today? It's a lofty question.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. The first part is kind of to some degree easy because there's no question, particularly if anybody's read the Frankenstein novel, and you realize, with the exception of bringing the dead back to life, that's about it. That's brought forward from. Oh, there's the question.
Just learned how to do that.
It's alive. The question is alive. The novel is, with the exception of reanimating life, is so different, and there's no question that the version of it in the 1931 film is a reaction to World War I, where for the first time we had seen mass killing on a level because of technology that nobody had comprehended. And so the idea of technology potentially being something bad, or producing bad things was very much, in the zeitgeist. And also the concept of, which starts really after the war and very much becomes a part of the Second World War, which is the idea of, because we can do something, should we do it? With the atomic bomb and things like that. So that's very much informed by the monsters. And in fact, this is sort of an idea that, there's kind of two tracks in the Universal monsters. And this is something I haven't quite figured out how to turn into story stuff, but you have the track of, and it's interesting because it's kind of in the first two films, in Dracula and Frankenstein. Frankenstein is very much about technology and what the dangers of technology and how it can be misused, where Dracula is about evil that is the natural world, because there's no technology involved. It's a curse. It's spiritual. So it's kind of, those are the two tracks, the technological terrors and the terrors of nature, that the Universal monsters represent from the beginning.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's an idea that I've had for a while that I haven't quite figured out how to turn into a story engine, but or into one of our events. But it was an idea that I realized, and it would be interesting to sort of go through. And like, the Mummy is definitely on the side of nature, and then Frankenstein is technology. And they sort of kind of ping pong back and forth. The Invisible Man is kind of technology, because it's a guy who creates something. The Creature from the Black Lagoon is nature. So it's kind of an interesting split.
Yeah, I always think of the Invisible Man as like, if you had the power to do anything with no consequences, like, what would you do? Or I guess, how do consequences hold us back from maybe our true desires, however good or evil those things might be, and what evils lie within us that are too scary for us to face without. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, it does. I mean, again, that's what makes particularly these films so wonderful. And this will now, I will go into the second part of his question, because the ones in the 30s, first of all, they weren't horror films. They were films that dealt with subject matter that we now consider horror. So they were just films that examined a question, a very important question about technology. Should we do it because we can? Where now, I'm afraid they've just turned into how to scare teenagers, on date night. That's kind of what they've kind of turned into. And as you do, as we talked about at some of our panels, why I'm not as much a fan of the more current stuff, that they don't really, these early ones are profound. They are dealing with what you described about the Invisible Man is exactly right. These are profound questions. This in the Invisible Man, he's driven mad by his desire to discover something, and he's gone crazy, and to some extent Frankenstein too. Those are profound questions. I'm not quite sure what, the profound question of, I know what you did last summer is, so.
That's so interesting, because of course, yes, I see is the word profundity? I see the profundity, profoundness in those original monsters. And I often draw parallels between like Dracula and Frankenstein and immigration, or the Great Depression, or I think that there are a lot of cultural things that were going on at the time that, yes, make these movies really big. I think that we can come to like the modern era too sometimes and find those things. Give me a little time with I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I'll find it. But I also don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with horror for fun or instant gratification in our. I think that the modern horror often represents like the need for instant gratification. Let's just make something bigger, scarier, bloodier, whatever. But I also think on the other side, we have modern horror films that do some of these things really well. I mean, I even really love the new Invisible Man. I turn back to that movie a lot as like a sort of remake or a reimagining of the classic horror film that I think is fantastic. And it talks, or it represents, sort of that, what would you call it, kind of toxic masculinity and domestic violence. And it delves into a deeper issue in a very modern way, and has a couple really good scares in it.
That's a very good point. I don't want to come across as grumpy old man. So, And you do make a very, very good point.
I will really go to bat for remakes of films, even when they're terrible for the most part. Like I have a really hard time defending the 2017 Mummy, and it's going to be really hard to come around on that one, or kind of how they conceived of the new Dark Universe at the time. But generally speaking, I will all for more remakes and reimaginings, and like let's just get versions of all of it, because I can only imagine that at least a couple people who saw the new Invisible Man asked then what other Invisible Man movies are out there and went back and watched the original. And the same with the Mummy, the same with the Wolfman. I don't think ever that these new versions are going to bury the originals. I think that they unearth them. I think they only give more people a chance to find them.
No, that's a very good point, and no question. And it seems to have done, the original ones, that we love so much are more popular than ever. My God, and you were just there, the Universal Monsterland in Florida is, I mean, could you imagine what would Junior and Senior think of that? I mean, it's so amazing.
I thought about that the whole time that I was there. I couldn't stop wondering what they would think. So, and for context, for anybody who just joined us, I went to the opening of the Epic Universe in Orlando, I guess about a month ago now. And it's Epic Universe has like 4 or 5 different worlds in it, but one of the worlds is the Dark Universe, which is dedicated to all of the Universal monsters. And they specifically have a Monsters Unchained ride, which features pretty much all of the monsters. They've got a Wolfman themed ride. They've got, restaurants and shows and exhibits and character actors all around. It's incredible. And it really feels like you time traveled to like the old Frankenstein sets or something. I, of course, couldn't help but wonder the whole time what Uncle Carl and Junior would have thought. And I think more than anything, I kept going back to Uncle Carl's sense of like community and how he pictured like film and the film industry and just life, right? Like he wanted to bring people together. He wanted people to watch his movies. He wanted people, I mean, he invented the movie studio tour, right? All the way back in 1916. He was the first one to invite people into his studio so that they could experience his movies and the making of them and all the magic behind it. So I just think that he would love the new Epic Universe and just everything that Universal has turned into today. I know some people, sorry, and I know I'm ranting here, but some people feel like maybe we've lost the heart or the core of what Universal was. But I think that this is what Uncle Carl would have been building to also. I don't think he would have wanted to stay like a tiny family studio.
Oh no, he was a businessman, a very good one.
Yeah.
He liked the good life. That's, Diaz Dorados was something he liked. He liked the big home, and no question. The closest, because I imagine they would have been absolutely blown away by it and absolutely charmed. The closest I got to sort of getting a sense of somebody in that position, I got to have lunch one time with Julie Adams, the actress that was in Creature from the Black Lagoon, who was very public, and I'm sure people who are watching, a lot of people met her. She did a lot of conventions and appearances. But I remember at this lunch, it was through a friend of a friend. It was just me and her and the friend. And I remember just asking, I said, did you have any idea that 50 years later that, any of this? And I just remember the laugh that came out of her. It was just like, she was like, are you kidding me? They were making some movie on the back lot, and had no idea that it would, and it's such a great film. But so that's kind of, I'm sure that would have been part of it too with them. They would have been delighted, but I'm sure they would have been like, are you kidding me? Like, think of it in the context of the time of all the major stars they worked with and who are completely forgotten, and all the big films that they did, and all the things that they tried so hard to be the prestige hits that would, stand the test of time. And the ones that really do are these, wonderful horror films that I'm sure they thought would be forgotten the next year.
A running theme that I always hear is like, David Manners and Helen Chandler and Dracula didn't take the movie seriously. They weren't happy to do it. Zita Johann on The Mummy didn't take the movie seriously.
Yeah.
I want to say Mae Clark as well, like wasn't stoked to be doing it. Evelyn Ankers, for sure, no.
Yeah.
It sounds like Julia Adams too. Like nobody had a lot of faith in the movies while they were making it. It was just what their contract told them to do.
Yeah.
And they ended up being kind of what they were remembered for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Gloria Holden for Dracula's Daughter, same thing.
Yeah. I think they gave it their all and they definitely tried. I just don't think they thought this was the one that was going to get them to the next level, in terms of their careers.
Julian, we've got a question for you. Is there a film version of your book, It's Alive, in discussion yet? And who would you cast?
That's a fun one. I wish there was. I'm a little shocked that there isn't because I've had other books of mine optioned. Thank you, Antonia. That have been optioned to be movies and TV shows. And this one I thought was a slam dunk, to just be honest with you. And it hasn't been. And I'm sort of shocked, and I would certainly love it to be. Maybe when I get around to finishing the sequel, that'll put it over the top. In terms of the casting, Tom Holland would be terrific as Junior. Somebody who popped into my head to play Boris, who I think is an interesting idea, is Michael Shanahan, the tall Michael Shanahan. Would be very good to play Boris. I'd love if anybody else in the comments had ideas for the other parts, but Tom Holland would be great as Junior. He's such a castable role. I mean, you just and you don't have to exaggerate who he was. One of the fun things about researching him and reading interviews with him, he was the first of the next generation of Hollywood kids to sort of move into the family business. But his father, our seniors generation of studio head, were the immigrants who came here. So most of them were born in the old country. So they were very much immigrants. But Junior was an American, and so he speaks with 20s speak. He talks about pep and pizzazz, and it's great reading interviews because he talks that way in like New York Times interviews. So he's a fun character, and a lot of actors could have a great time playing him.
I think often about if I were to cast both Junior and Senior in something, who it would be. I never have like a good, like I've never found the person for either of them, but it's so interesting. I think with Carl Laemmle Senior, even though he's an incredible man, sometimes it's hard to find all the nuance or layers in him because it's like, well, he's just a great guy. But Junior, there's so much meat to him. He had, I think, his sort of potentially OCD, anxiety things, which are really fun. He has this fascination with the dark and the macabre. He was something, I think, of a playboy for a while, and then something of maybe not necessarily a recluse, but a little more shut in his later life. He had MS, he struggled with a lot of things. So whoever at some point gets to play Junior, like there's so much to dig into there. And I also love thinking too about he must have, just all the tension between him, Paul Kohner, Irving Thalberg, right? All vying for Carl's like love and attention. And I'm sure it didn't feel like great for Junior sometimes to feel like he was maybe in the same running with other people who weren't his dad's son.
No question. No, he's an amazing character because even once the MS set in and he became, like you said, he became a recluse in the terms of it was hard for him to leave to travel, to leave the house. But as the event where we first met a few years ago, those other family members who knew him said that they had regular Sunday dinners with him. So he was a very social animal. And I've seen references in some articles that he had a very popular New Year's Day party that he would often throw in the 40s and 50s, and also would have parties, it seems, to watch sporting events. So he liked to, well, this is something that your family was very big on, which I love. They love to throw a party, that comes up all the time. And I mentioned in the Junior presentation that Bud Schulberg, the famous screenwriter who wrote What Makes Sammy Run, a character that definitely has a touch of Junior in him, talks about going to one of the parties at the Laemmles. And there's another novel from the 1920s that also, it's a roman à clef where characters aren't, they're real people, but they have different names. And there's characters that are clearly the Laemmles and talk about how they've taken party throwing to the next level. So, it was very much a part of Junior.
They loved a party. In particular, I believe that they loved costume parties, like on my Patreon, on my sort of paid YouTube thing. I'm always posting pictures that I'm finding of them at different costumed events. They're wearing fake mustaches or capes or things. I've got pictures of Ernst Laemmle riding an elephant. Like, they went big all the time. And then they also loved gambling and a good poker game, the horse races. That was another way that I think that they were very social and like to have a good time. I like to think that a little bit I follow in their footsteps there.
Did you ever get a chance to ask your aunt about Junior, because she obviously knew him quite well?
Yeah, I used to talk with Carla about Junior quite a bit. I mean, it's so funny because in some ways, I think that there's still, I don't even know what you would call it, like almost a formal family hierarchy that was in place back in the day. So she had all sorts of memories of going to parties and events and things with Junior. But Junior was also somebody that she very much looked up to. I think that in comparison, even though they were only a few years apart in age, she felt like he was so much more grown up than her so much sooner. And so he was somebody that she always talked to in this way of like great respect versus like my buddy Junior. So yes, but also no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm sure she must have been at some amazing events with them.
Yes, yeah, and I'll find it's so funny too. Like, I'll find now pictures of her at parties or in events, things. It's like the more that I'm learning my family, the more now that I can find like somebody's profile in the very back of a shot or something to say, "Oh my gosh, you were there too. You were part of this also." I go to the LA Breakfast Club a lot of Wednesdays in LA, which is this club. It's been around for 100 years. Carl Laemmle was the president of it in like 1930, 31, something like that, for just a year. And I found a picture recently that is Carl, my great-grandfather Eddie Laemmle, his wife Peppy, Carla, Stanley Bergerman, and Rosabelle. Like, it's the whole family except Junior. He's not in the picture, but everyone else is in the picture. And I found out recently that it's at the LA Breakfast Club. So I knew that Carl was going to it, but I didn't know the whole family was going to the Breakfast Club back then. But there's just all these things now where I just keep finding like more, just like entanglement's not the right word, right? But just they were all hanging out even more than I ever envisioned.
That's awesome. It's a fun detective thing when I was doing the research. Anytime Junior would suddenly show up, like in the Bud Schulberg memoir, it was like, oh my God, and ironically, it goes even farther because, as I said, I made Sidney Fox a character in my novel. Bud Schulberg goes to a party at the Laemmles with Sidney Fox, and that's real. That's not a made-up story. That he tells that story of going with her on a date to the party. And again, you've heard me do this in the presentation. He writes that they left before it got too out of hand, which again, I would like to know what that meant.
I wish I knew what that meant.
Yeah. So,
I actually recently went. Junior Laemmle's house last year was on the market. It was for sale. And so I went to one of the open houses and just kind of walked through the house. I think a lot of it was, I think the bones and the layout was mostly the same, save for they knocked down a wall of one room to make it, or of two rooms to make it one big one. But the lawn there, the backyard, the pool, the view, you could tell it was the house of somebody that liked to entertain and have people over. There's like no other reason to buy the house and the layout and all of the thing like that except to entertain. It was beautiful.
Well, some of your cousins who we met at the Hollywood Heritage event referenced that, going there quite a bit, and
Yes.
and that was one of the nicest things of that event, besides meeting you for the first time in person, was seeing how good of a person Junior seemed to be. That was really nice to hear that story over and over from people who actually knew him, and knew him years after, his career, as a movie maker. And wasn't it also fascinating to hear from several of your cousins that they barely knew that they had been in the film business?
Yeah.
Like, they kind of knew they had something to do with Universal, but no, you didn't have something, you created it, and just to hear that was just kind of amazing, because I'm sure, as you've done, and if I was, I'd be like, hey, I'm part of the family, Universal. But, as we also talked about at that event, it kind of is a little different, because it was also a business, unfortunately, that they had to let go of. So it was a little bit of a little bit of a painful memory, but it was fascinating to hear that they didn't really know, that they didn't know a lot of the history.
There's a theme in my family, which probably occurs in a lot of families, of like not talking about things, and probably like, yeah, I think that there was a point where they didn't see Universal as a success because they lost it, and so it was something that they didn't talk about so much. We also had whole branches of the family that didn't talk for like decades, not necessarily because of Universal specifically, but because of like my great grandfather, he traveled the world making movies for Universal. He went to like Japan and Thailand and Borneo, all of these places, but he died a very early death. I think the actual reason, he had a heart attack like in his 40s, that I think was the result of getting dengue fever while he was traveling. My great grandmother thought that he was, I think, cursed by some of the people that he interacted with, that I think almost killed him while he was traveling. But either way, she then held a lot of resentment over, like, with my uncle Carl, kind of believing that he was a little bit responsible for my great grandfather's death. And because of that, then those two branches of the family didn't talk much for many years. My mom has all sorts of memories of Junior calling the house when she's little, but not like, it's not like, oh, that they were hanging out or talking, because my great grandmother didn't really want to talk to him, or like never really forgave him for that. And so that was something then that she was never really comfortable talking about in her life, that then got kind of passed down. And then separately, we weren't so connected to Junior. Like, my mom didn't get to know Junior, though they were alive at the same time, because those families weren't really interacting. So that's part of why now I have so much to like uncover today, is because those stories weren't all shared the way that they should have been.
Yeah, no, families are complicated, and
yeah,
and the larger they get, the more complicated, and you got a big family,
Yeah. Are there any other kind of going back to Boris and Bela, like any other kind of previews or ideas that you can give us as to the panel next week at San Diego Comic-Con and what people can expect?
Yeah, well, I hope they'll come. We're gonna, talk about their careers. We've talked about some of it here. I'm going to go into the details, or we're going to go into the details of, the journeys that they took to that amazing moment, because, this is part of the setup for the presentation that I give, but it is really a remarkable story, because you have two actors, two men who enter 1931, the year 1931, as complete unknowns. And by the end of 1931, they are both household names, and they will be for the rest of their lives. It's an amazing story. And that's what we're going to center on, is just this journey that they took to that moment, and then their careers afterwards, and how Universal, started pairing them together, and how the two of them, even though they both went on to do a lot of other things, they're like peanut butter and jelly. They're kind of, in a lot of ways, always spoken about together, even though, again, they had very different careers and were very different people. But there is a natural pairing of them, and it's justified, and we're gonna go deep into that. And they left behind some really, really entertaining movies that they made together, because no question the most entertaining of all of the ones that have sort of are the most famous are the Universal ones in terms of their pairings, no question.
Yeah, I think, going back to when I had asked you about your favorite, my favorite is The Black Cat. I think that movie is so fun.
Oh, it's so
They go head to head in the best way, and it's one of the few where they're really like on equal footing, and they both have so much to do in the best way. And I mean, I just also can't believe that that movie got made back in the 1930s. It deals with some of the darkest topics you can think
yeah.
of. And it's beautifully shot.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the more perfect movies I've seen.
It's beyond Boris and Bela's contribution, which is obviously the main reason we're talking about them, but it's Edgar Ulmer, and it looks unlike any other film you've ever seen. This gorgeous Art Deco sets. It doesn't look like any other Universal horror film. It's such a unique film, separate of even getting Boris and Bela in it. So that really is part of the fun of it too, how beautiful it looks, like you said.
I noticed we're getting a little bit close to the hour, so I do want to open up. I want to give everybody a chance to get their questions in the comment box. So leave your questions just before we go if you've got anything else. I also just want to take another moment to remind everybody to get It's Alive, which is such a great book about those days leading up to the making of Frankenstein, when they didn't know whether Boris or Bela was going to be cast as the monster. It's so, so fun. If you will be at Comic-Con next week, Julian and I are going to be there. We will be presenting in room 32AB and the convention center at 4:00 on Sunday. And we'll also be doing a signing at 2:30 in the autograph area 21 in the sales pavilion. So please come see us, come say hi, and come check out the panel. And
if I could just jump in, they will have copies of the book for sale at the signing. So you can see both of us. You can have us both sign it if you like, or you can also get this fabulous thing, which will be available also, this wonderful postcard of Antonia's for her channel. But yes, the book will be available at the signing also.
Yes. And, I just want to ask really quickly as well, is there anything you can share about the sequel that you're working on to the book?
Well, I think it'll be good. No, I'm working away on it. I kind of, as I told you, I kind of got sucked off onto another book I was writing, but I'm going to be, I'm pretty far along, and I'm going to be concentrating on it because I'm getting tired. I love being asked, but I need to do it to get people to stop asking me for it. Even though I'm thrilled that they're asking for it, I want to jump on it because there's so much more to the story. Your family is very interesting in all the best ways. And I want to write more about it, and so are Boris and Bela. And there's some new people that join the party. Elsa Lanchester, of course, the bride. We have to talk about the bride. One of the things I will say, and we've talked about this before when we spoke at Monster Palooza, that you have a character that has 4 minutes of screen time that you could go on the street right now and show them a picture of, and I would bet you 98% of the people, if not 99% of the people, could tell you exactly who that is. And probably half of them have never seen the film, but they know that character. So there's something there in that character that Elsa Lanchester brought to life. So I'm going to get that in the novel. She was an amazing character. And frankly, I'm happy to be writing a woman's point of view of entering this universe of the Universal monsters, because my other book, it's Boris, Bela, and Junior. I want to bring her perspective to it, and you could write a whole book on her. She's amazing, Elsa Lanchester.
She is such a character. I was going to pull out because I think I have her book right here. Not to share another book, but Elsa Lanchester's autobiography is like, she was such an interesting person. I think, Julian, you shared some stories at our last presentation about her that were she had quite a life, and a lot of the stuff that she went through in her life is very applicable to the world we live in now, and so that's why it makes the
her story so interesting. And going back to the monsters, why the monsters are so interesting, because we're still dealing with the questions of those original Universal films about technology. AI now is a very big thing about, just because we can do it, should we do it? That's kind of one of the ultimate ones, and that's what those films all those years ago were examining.
Totally. And I wanted to go back to when we were talking about casting. I think I saw a lot of Jeremy Irons for Boris Karloff, and a lot of agreement for that.
That's a fantastic one.
And then I think you see Colin Farrell. Let me see what this says. Hear me out. Colin Farrell just transitioned to a character actor that's laced in makeup and said he liked the escape, not seeing his own face in the mirror. I'm not sure if that's for Boris.
He'd be He'd be an interesting Bela. His looks, the dark hair. He's an interesting Bela. Oh, Colin,
I also see
Colin Clive, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then I saw another question about what Universal might do to celebrate. I think it's this one. November 15th will be the 100th anniversary of Phantom of the Opera. Oh wait, no, that's not the comment that I wanted. I got too drunk on power here. Here we go. Phantom turns 100 this November. Do you think Universal will do anything for Dracula and Frankenstein in 2031?
I would say yes, I would think. Don't you think?
I think so, yes. And I'm more hopeful now. Actually, I'll tell you the one reason I'm less hopeful and the one reason I'm more hopeful. I'm a little bit less hopeful because there's right now a Guillermo del Toro Frankenstein that's about to come out that is Netflix. It's not a Universal film. And so I wonder if for a time, although I guess 2031 is a couple years away, but if for a time Universal is going to maybe distance itself from some of that, so there's not too much
That's really interesting, yeah.
But on the other
go ahead, finish your thought, then I'll
on the other side, 2031 is a couple years away, so maybe everybody will have totally moved on by then. Maybe Universal will make its own new Frankenstein remake, which I know they've considered for quite some time. Additionally, now that we have the epic universe and the dark universe, it makes me think there's more opportunity to do big celebrations and to lean into the monster love. And I hope they'll do something, but I don't know what that looks like.
I was just going to talk a little about the Del Toro Frankenstein that's coming. Antonia, are you familiar with the I think it's 73 or 74, the TV movie of Frankenstein? Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's really good, but how do I put this? Because the Del Toro one looks much more influenced by that than the original Frankenstein, just from the stills I've seen. It's much truer to the book, but it's also, how do I say this delicately? I saw it when I was about 10 or 12, and I missed 99% of it because it was written by a very famous gay playwright. And at 10 or 12, I missed what he was doing. I mean, it's wonderful, but it definitely goes into some directions in it that are almost Rocky Horror level of camp. And it's great, but it's funny to me because if you've ever seen it, I highly recommend it because it's terrific. But the Del Toro one looks more like that. It has that kind of almost steampunk look. You know how the Del Toro.
I was just going to say, there's a book, Bernie Wrightson did a version of Frankenstein with illustrations that were inspired very much by the descriptions in the book. And I think that this Frankenstein, at least in terms of its look, its aesthetic, those things, I think are actually following Bernie's illustrations
The Del Toro?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
interesting. I didn't know that. Oh,
because, and I believe this to be true because, so I think Bernie passed away, but his wife was on the Frankenstein set with Del Toro and posted pictures with Del Toro. So I could see, and I'm not sure because I haven't seen it, that maybe the 74, is that what you said, 74 version followed the book maybe a little more closely, and maybe that's what Bernie Wrightson's illustrations do as well. But I think that there's going to be that might be some of the inspiration for it. but
Oh, that's really
this
interesting.
is a little bit conjecture.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yes, yeah. So I am, I'll say I don't think I included this in because I did do a video about Del Toro's Frankenstein, what I thought we could expect and kind of how it might compare to the original. I'll be honest, at the first 15 times that I watched the Del Toro trailer, I wasn't necessarily so into it, and I had a really hard time feeling like it was like my monster or my movie. It felt like a reimagining, but just nothing like necessarily anything that I might connect to. Now, there was a shift. I think maybe some of the pieces of the trailer fell a little more into place for me. I was able to see how it fit into the whole Frankenstein story. I'm at least eager to see it now. But I don't know. I loved The Shape of Water so much. I think Del Toro's a genius. I want to believe in his vision, but I didn't connect to the trailer right away. I like more than anything, I want to see it on a big screen in LA. I don't want to watch it on on
I
my TV
know.
at home.
I hope, because I know there was a movement to try to get them to put it in theaters. I'm hoping at least, I don't want to, give short shrift to the rest of the country, but I hope at least LA and New York or something, we get a chance to have it, because we have the Netflix theater here, the Egyptian. I can't believe they would miss that opportunity, but there doesn't seem to be any talk of it. And it comes out pretty soon, or did they push it?
It will be in November, which also makes me think that they might be going for an awards push, which makes me think that they have to put it in theaters. I think that's still one of the requirements.
It is. Oh, for some reason I thought it was coming out in July. I thought originally it was coming out in July, but it's not. It was always been November.
That's just what I saw most recently.
Oh,
so I think it'll be November.
Interesting. Huh. For some reason I thought it was.
Yeah. So we'll see. Jerry's out. I'm trying to stay optimistic. Like I said, I love Del Toro's other work. He's a monster kid at heart. He's, one of us, Google Gobble. So I think I only have opportunity to be pleasantly surprised. We've got another question. What's our opinion on the book and or film of Gods and Monsters? Good to fictional? I've only seen the movie, not the book. I love it. What about you?
As 2 huge thumbs up for both. Love the book, loved the movie. I mean, if nothing else, just for the 2-minute recreation of the Bride of Frankenstein set, I can watch that over and over again. I almost feel like that scene is what almost made me write my novel, to be honest with you. Just watching that scene, I just loved it. And I loved, Ian McKellen is so wonderful in that role. It's such a beautiful movie. So no, it's really just beautiful, and 2 thumbs up. And a moment to me that showed the passion of the people that made that film. If you remember, the film got a lot of Academy Award nominations, but the only one that I believe won was Best Screenplay for Gods and Monsters. And I remember when I'm forgetting his name, Bill Condon, I believe his name, the gentleman who directed it. When he was up there accepting his award, they cut to the audience, and there was a shot of Brendan Fraser, Ian McKellen, and the actress who played she's passed away. Oh my God.
Someone put it in the comments.
The actress who played the maid, she's the sister, Lynn Redgrave. It was Lynn Redgrave who played the 3 of them. They cut to the 3 of them in the audience, and all 3 of them were holding hands, with just look of just love that he was winning an Academy Award for writing this movie that they were all in. And that just told me how connected they all felt to this beautiful story of this amazing director who, I'm telling you, when you watch, I love Son of Frankenstein, but you see the work of what a director does when you compare that film to Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. It's just, James Whale is such a wonderful director. There, as much as I love Boris and Bela, and particularly Boris, because we're talking about Frankenstein, we're not here if not for James Whale. His direction of those films is so beautiful, and what he brought out of Boris. And again, it had to be in Boris to be brought out. But he's so wonderful. So I love that movie. Long answer, yes. 2 thumbs up to that movie and the book.
I agree. I think it's a beautiful movie. Absolutely love it. And, you know, I think I get asked a lot, and I think a lot about how to get new generations invested in our original monsters and our original movies. And I think things like of Gods and Monsters is such an important part of it. And not to, but to go back to like It's Alive is such an important part of it, because it can be hard sometimes to connect to history without that narrative element. And so to get to experience James Whale as a person, or Junior Laemmle as a person, even if it's a little bit fictional along the way, I think that that's just one of the most important pieces of keeping the history alive. So I don't mind if things veer off course. Somebody can go to Wikipedia if they want the facts, and they can go to Gods and Monsters or If It's Alive if they just want to connect and be a part of it.
Yeah, it's, I'm, I tried to follow as many facts, but there's a lot of scenes we don't know what really happened. So,
Yeah.
You just write the best you can. And, it's historical fiction. It's not being told as nonfiction. So.
Yeah, I want to, well, first give you a big, big, big thank you, Julian, for joining me here today.
Great. Always a blast.
Again, we've been talking about It's Alive. We have been talking about our panel that we'll be doing next Sunday about the twin titans of terror, Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. We'll be at San Diego Comic-Con at 4 o'clock on Sunday. We would love to see you guys there. We will also be in the Sales Pavilion signing at 2:30. Please come say hi. Please let us know if you saw us here today. We would love to meet all of you guys.
Yes.
And Julie, love to do this again with you sometime. This is, I mean, I could just talk to you forever about this stuff.
Anytime. And I look forward to next Sunday. And, we have some other stuff on the horizon together, and it's always a blast.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.